Hey, this is Driver 88, and back in 2020, I put in my expression of interest to buy a GT4RS. 18 months later, I received a gentian blue Weissach pack car that I absolutely loved in 2022. I enjoyed the car, tracked it. It's quite interesting and exciting to drive. I subsequently lost my license for a year. So I decided to sell the car and make a quick $20,000 flip before the market dropped. I'm just kidding. No, I gave it back to the dealership and didn't make any money on it. Fast forward 3 years from now, and I'm looking at GT4RSs in the used market, and I think they produce probably more value for money than they ever have since they came out. So we're going to revisit the GT4RS and compare it to a GT3 and have a look on what's on the market at the moment, because I think it's providing more value than ever before for a Porsche GT car. So let's talk money for a moment, and that's where we start to see the divide get wider and wider between the GT3 and the 4RS. So here down under, we've got 24 of these for sale and just 7 992 GT3s in auto. So the prices of these naturally have taken a bit more of a hit, but at least if you're looking at the used market, you've got a huge choice of colors and specs. There's a massive range between, say, $300,000 for a higher kilometer car, up to dealerships for approved cars asking $500,000 for a PTS car with magnesium wheels. The Weissach pack was around 30,000 Australian dollars. The magnesium wheels, I mean, it's up to you whether you think it's worth it, but they were a huge option of something like 28 grand. I kind of think a slightly higher kilometer Weissach pack car is probably the thing that you would want to be looking at. This car is quite low kilometers. Many of them are still sitting on really pretty much brand new condition and have been sitting for sale for at least a year or so. So there's definitely deals to be had there. And I think when you look at the new 992.2 GT3, you put seats in that, you're talking 520,000 Australian dollars. This thing is well under 100,000 plus dollars cheaper than that for a very slightly used example. And it makes it look even more of a better budget track sports car from Porsche. Now, there's no doubt that this obviously came onto the scene with an unbelievable Nordschleife time. I think it's 7 minutes and 9 seconds, but in my experience, compared to a 992 GT3 and previous GT3 RSs, this car demands a lot more respect than the other GT products. Having had the pleasure of owning a GT3 RS in the past and putting 10,000 kilometers, proper kilometers on that car and then owning one of these, I can tell you this, I've got no ego about this. The 3RS tidied up my mistakes and my lack of ability to drive by having just a huge amount of grip and downforce and poise. This car, when I took it on track, it takes so much more steering effort. The car bounces around so much more. And I think one of the biggest reasons why a GT3 is much easier to get a time out of is not just, of course, the front suspension, but you've got a lot more tire on the front especially and the back. When you look at that Jörg Bergmeister lap time, you can see him fighting that car the whole 7 minutes. Whereas if you look at GT3 and GT3 Manthey times, it just seems to come so much easier to get the performance out of. And that might well suit a lot of people though. So really entertaining car to take on track. Now, to add to all that, I've noticed with GT4RS owners, and there's probably a few of you guys watching, of GT cars, so many people have slightly modified their suspension or looked at Manthey kits for their suspension and handling mods, changing the suspension setup and camber and toe and all that sort of stuff to combat some of these deficiencies that we've seen and talked about on track. And I'm finding that with a few tweaks here and there, even a few mods, that is where this car has really matched the 992 GT3 and then even gone beyond it with a bit of tweaking and a few mods here and there. It's certainly something that takes a bit of trial and error, I've noticed, for a number of owners, but the rewards are all there. Now, when it comes to speccing a 4RS, if you still can in your region, production is finished at least July last year here in Australia. All you really need to do with a 4RS is pick one option, and that is the front lift system. You don't really have to pick anything else that's going to change the performance at all, but the front lift system I think is an absolute guaranteed must pick. Now that there's lots for sale, you can have pretty much any color that you like, but GT Silver over black, I tell you what, it's understated, but I think it's one of my favorite specs of all the GT4RSs that I've seen for sale. Speaking of that, this one's for sale at our friends at Cavallo Prestige. It has, of course, the Weissach pack, and with the Weissach pack, we get the carbon bonnet. If you can, I prefer so much the CXX special option carbon bonnet. That means that we get a hoop of carbon a la the old GT2RS, whereas that just kind of blends into the rest of the car so much better than this big contrast. I'll show you a picture of it now. Now, when it comes to more speccing, personally, I'd love a car with CCBs. They were a pretty expensive option, but I personally prefer the feel of carbon ceramic brakes against steels. Yes, of course, they're more expensive. How many kilometers and how often are you going to be replacing those? I don't exactly know, but I think it's still worth pitching the extra money in to get CCBs. With the interior, not all these cars came with a cage. Particularly love a titanium cage. I think it looks really, really cool. Also, of course, gives you the added protection if something horrible happens. It's buckets or nothing with these guys, of course. And I think we should have a look at the inside. Take it for a drive. Now, of course, despite being a track-focused car, we do have quite a decent amount of storage. If you want to take this away for a long weekend, you've got not only storage in the front, but of course storage in the back. And you can fit a reasonable amount of stuff in the rear here. I did used to take my GT4 that I had before, one of these, for long weekends. They're fantastic. You can even lay a suit across the back of a GT4. Not this one though, because the carbon engine cover is sitting there. Now, of course, these guys are not easy to get in and out of, but they're sort of one of those things that you get used to it pretty quickly. I feel that these are my favorite buckets of pretty much any brand. And recently, if you've seen our channel on Driver 88, we've driven about every supercar you can imagine, and these are still my favorite buckets. They seem to give you a lot of good side support, but also don't kill my lower back because I have 2 discs protruding. Anyway, fantastic seats. This is probably not a car that you're going to drive daily. I couldn't imagine anyone would, particularly on our terrible Australian roads. I'll talk about that now when we take it for a drive though. Now, the smell of new Porsche is one of the best out of all brands. Now, definitely you can tell that design-wise this is a car from about 10 years ago, but the quality of the materials, the satin carbon is just gorgeous. The stitching, the Alcantara everywhere. You can get leather on everything if you wish. The door pulls, just lovely. Everything is so uniform. Let's start it up. You get to actually put a key in. Imagine that, so nice. We have very few buttons. I wish we had a bumpy road mode, but we don't. We can open up the pipes though, and put our front lift on as we get out of here. I love Porsche steering wheels, so extra thin. No buttons, no need for any other rubbish, and we have an analog tack. I love analog tacks. Amazing. Now, it's always nice to be in the car with someone who hasn't experienced a GT4RS before at the full 9,000 RPM. There's still nothing like this sound. We've driven a lot of supercars lately. They don't have anything that sort of compares to how loud this is. We'll just put our lift down though. From the inside, and owning the car, when I did take it on long trips, I will say it is pretty droney, so it can get on your nerves just a little bit. Now, I have owned a GT4 GT4 and a 3RS in the past, and one thing that did sort of get on my nerves with this car is I'm used to having really stiffly sprung cars and driving them and pushing them a little bit on the road. But one thing I've never experienced with either of those two past cars is have the car actually bounce in the air and go sideways over some of the smallest undulations and bumps you've ever seen. So as much as it is rewarding, I've even found the 992 GT3RS, which we had last year, to be able to take the bumps far better because it has more sophisticated suspension than this guy. I just wish you had some sort of bumpy road mode that you could still enjoy a B road a little bit more, and that's why I think part of the reason why a lot of them are sitting for sale. At least definitely in my state. Now over the last couple of months we've driven Ferraris, Lamborghinis, the STO, all sorts of supercars, and I don't care if this sounds cliche, I really don't. The steering on a GT Porsche is the most satisfying steering to take even at low speeds or at high speeds. There's something about the steering feel, it is just so satisfying between your hands. And like I said, yes, it's been said before, yes, it's cliche, and yes, it's true. Now speaking of the GT4, the 718 GT4 PDK, I feel that car, Porsche really held back so much, and that engine just doesn't feel like it has anywhere near the amount of torque and responsiveness and shorter gears as this car. There's just like this mountain of performance. So I kind of feel like if you're looking as a GT4 as an alternative to this, you may even be a little bit disappointed. There's very little substitute for a flat 6 at 9,000 RPM. And like I said, compared to my old 3RS, just managing this car's grip is a job in itself. The car shimmies around, it moves, it's fighting for traction, it dances. And I'm happy to put my hand up and say I'm not gonna be its dancing partner as good as many a better driver out there. Just a quick note, because we probably don't do enough of this, on reliability and servicing. I mean, these are not cheap cars to own, but compared to, say, a similar priced $400,000 or $350,000 McLaren, used McLaren, or used Ferrari, the cost of owning a near new one of these are well below those other brands, at least in my experience from servicing and insurance. And of course, the last note on driving this thing, having Cup 2s, you need to get the tires warm with a bit of moving around and braking. You don't have a huge amount of power or a huge amount of torque from turbos to make it extra scary, but you still need to warm up the Cup 2s. Otherwise, you're gonna be, drifting if you want to, why not? It can play that role as well. So let's take a quick look at the used market here in Australia. We of course pay extremely high prices for our cars, so let me know what's happening in your region. Now when it comes to overall numbers, the GT4RS, we've got 24 units currently for sale, which is quite high, and just 7 GT3s for sale of the 992 PDK variant. So we have 6 different colors to choose from for the 4RS and just 4 colors to choose from for the GT3. Now, if you're wondering, under sticker price, half of the GT4RSs are currently sitting well under sticker price. And the cheapest one that I've found may just be my old car. It's a gentian blue car. The pics aren't up yet, but that's sitting at $310,000. So that would mean that even after taxes in most states, you're looking at about $100,000 under sticker for a 10,000 kilometer GT4RS. And half of the other ones that I've seen under sticker are in varying kilometers of say 2 to 10,000 kilometers, but I think that a number of them really offer up a fairly good deal. When it comes to the GT3, however, things are very different. Because there's just 7 units for sale, and the new GT3 is going to be delivered imminently, it seems that these numbers aren't really moving that much. And every single one of those units are pretty much at sticker price or over sticker price. And these are cars that are 4 years old and have some kilometers on them, which is pretty amazing considering the age and usage of these cars. Now, the reasons why are pretty certain is that the brand new 2025.2 GT3 is $520,000 with buckets, whereas back in 2021, the sticker price was $445,000 roughly with buckets for a GT3. So we've seen a 16.8% increase in the sticker price over that 4-5 year period. And that is actually helping the older cars value, because people are kind of thinking, well, if you want to buy a new car, you're looking at 520 grand and you're not going to get any discounts. So if you're after a slightly older car, well, we can ask a little bit on sticker or very much close to it for a car that's already 4 years old. So the GT3 still is holding up really well. Porsche seems to know exactly how many cars to give to each region generally. They're a little bit like Rolex. They have a really good gauge of their customer base, and they don't seem to make too many cars. Every time I see a model start to flood the market a little bit after about 18 months, as soon as that gets up there, it seems to just taper off, because the build period generally for GT cars is only 2.5 to 3 years, and then all of a sudden people start again scrabbling for those cars after a 2 or 3 year period, once they know that they're not going to get a new car and they're not going to get a current car. So that is the game with the used market. Ultimately, I think what it shows us is that for $100,000 off sticker price, you can get a near new GT4RS with relatively low kilometers, and I think that is an excellent deal compared to a 992 GT3, and I just have to leave it on that. This is Driver 88, and we'll see you next time.